All right, another Camaro update video time. As you can see, we have made some significant progress. Got basically the front end completely together. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. A couple little modifications I want to do here and there. Got my SS's mounted. Got drilling into the stripe was harrowing for sure. Got the cowl on, side view mirror. This year Camaro doesn't actually have a passenger side mirror, so cut off easy there. Put the trim on, put all the emblems on the rear here, rear bumper, rear tail lights, and everything works. Everything functions. We have our battery mounted in the back in typical hot rodder fashion, and my trickle charger there. Usually hook that up. So that's awesome. And then this piece here that holds the rear panel on and stuff, it's just welded on here, and the welds were really crummy and it actually ended up breaking. So what I've done is just bolted it on, and I'll be putting just weather strip, the typical weather stripping over it, and you won't even be able to see it. It'll just be our little secret. I know I need an SS gas cap, and I know this thing needs a bath. A little speck there. Needs a bath. Bad. But I'm getting to that. And with the rear glass in with the trim, as well as the front glass with the trim, that was another saga. Got the gauges installed. So the gauges are all, I forget who makes them, Detroit Electric or something like that. One of those companies makes them, and they're vintage-esque looking, but they work perfectly like modern gauges, which is nice. Those gauges are pretty cool. They're like modern gauges where you give them power and they sweep to let you know that they're actually functioning, which is cool. And it has two LED screens, there and there, and shows you all the, info. It's pretty awesome. So underneath the car, we can see the big block we built looks fantastic. Oh yeah, and then our powder coated, K-member, or whatever you want to call the engine cradle piece, then powder coated lower control arm, upper control arms, brand new disc brakes. And then what's interesting is, so I had to change out my springs. Before, they were a 1-inch drop big block spring, and it sat way too high in the front, so I went with a 1.5-inch small block drop spring, and it rides absolutely perfect. It's exactly the height I want, and I'm going to guess because the big blocks are usually weighed with iron heads and we have aluminum, so you have quite a bit of less weight. That's what I'm guessing, but if you're having trouble getting your Camaro stance to right, maybe try the small block springs if you have a big block. Our headers look fantastic. Again, that powder coating job is amazing. And then underneath, I've showed this before, we have this nice undercoating that we sprayed, and it's really gonna stand up to the elements. On the transmission, I actually put a new pan that has a drain plug in it for our 700R4. And then we have our custom-made drive shaft. I forget how long that is, but I had that made by a local shop. And then we put our frame connectors in. Now, if you have an F-body, you have one of these old GM cars that don't connect the front to the back, or Mustangs are like this too, where there's nothing from the front frame that goes to the back superstructure of the car. The aftermarket has solved this with these frame connectors, and these are absolutely essential when you put big power in your car so it doesn't twist like a pretzel. And ours are made by Hotchkiss, my absolute favorite suspension brand. A lot of the things on this car are Hotchkiss, like the rear springs, those are Hotchkiss. And so are our tie rods and a couple other things. And there's our GM 12 bolt with 373 gears and a True Track limited slip. Works amazing. And again, you can see our undercoating job is perfect. We got our brand new tank back there. That looks great. Got our license plate mounted. That looks awesome. And then for the fuel line, well, you can see another thing we did recently. Those grommets aren't permanent, don't worry. Those are our power lines, so the red one you can kind of see, that's obviously our positive and our negative. And before I was just grounding the negative to the body, and that wasn't working so good. So what I did was I grounded it, might be a little tough to see. You can't quite see it, but I grounded it way up there on the bell housing, so that way electricity can flow to our starter a lot easier. and lets our starter work better, which is super important. So, and then our fuel line is AN line. I think that looks really nice and flows great, no leaks. I had the hard line in there before, but it was just a headache. It didn't look great. It kinked easy and dented easy. I just didn't like it. It was not a great solution. So I really like this AN stuff. It is awesome. And with the lights on, this car looks so cool. And then under the hood, since the big block build series wrapped up, I put on these AN connectors for the fuel and just have a 3/8 barb feeding the carb. I've had the carburetor tuned as well as the timing. I had that all handled by Superior, and they put it on the dyno, and we weren't there to make power. We were just there to get the tuning right. Now it's dead nuts on. The thing runs amazing and doesn't smell as much, which is just always nice. I also put on these snazzy wire holders for our big block. I think those look pretty nice, and they keep the wires off the header, which so happens often with these big blocks. So this car is moving right along. This will probably be the last update video for quite some time, because we are moving. So that took a while. You might be able to tell that this is actually a different shop, and I am a couple years older, so this video has kind of been sitting on the shelf for a minute, and I figured why not just kind of include it in the footage I already have. So basically made a little bit of progress on the project car, not really like a ton. That's the propensity of these cars, is they sit around for a while you accumulate time and or money, so you can finish them. So I'll give you a quick tour of what I've done so far in the 2 years this video sat on the shelf, and something we're going to change today. So we put in the wind mirrors, I guess you'd call them. They're like these little, I used to call them smoker's windows, but I don't think that's what they're actually called. That window is actually kind of special. It is bespoke to the 67 Camaro. They did not put that in any other year. Also, put the door handles in so I can stop opening it stupidly. I can actually open it correctly, and I had to modify these just a little bit to get them to work. You can't quite see. Oh yeah, you can. You can see a little on the striker plate down there. I basically had to put a little metal bulb on the end of the push rod to make it have good contact with the plate, so the door actually latches and unlatches. So that was something I did. And the thing we're going to change today is actually the exhaust, and I'll show you what I mean. So the exhaust in this car sounds fine, but I think it can sound a lot better. So let's get a cold start and a couple revs out of it. It sounds okay, but honestly, this car could sound a lot better. Let's find out how. So here's my actual header coming off my big block into the collector. It's a 3.5 inch, and it connects down to 2.5 inch pipe, which I'm fine with. I know a lot of people are gonna cry and tell me I should have used bigger pipe. Nah, I think these are fine. And then we have our O2 sensor right here, so we're gonna need to replace the bung in our new exhaust system. And this is just mild steel, and I've never been happy with this exhaust. When I built the exhaust, I didn't have a ton of funds, so I just kind of got like the cheapest kit off Summit Racing. I think this whole exhaust was like $200. It was really cheap. And these are just like regular tinny mufflers that are super small. I don't think they were ever really made to handle the exhaust from a big block Chevy, but I used them. And then they come up and over into an up and over pipe over the axle. And then it dumps right here after the leaf spring, which is typical of a first gen Camaro. That's not too crazy. Here's another thing I don't like about it, is the heat from the exhaust is right next to the paint. Honestly, I'm surprised it hasn't ruined it further. So we're not gonna do that. What I think I'm gonna do is either a dump right there after the muffler, just straight down, or up and over the axle. We'll kind of see what it sounds like the first way, and if I want it sort of further back away from the driver, we'll come back behind the axle, and that's how we'll do that. So I've got some new mufflers, some resonators, and some collectors, all made of stainless steel. So we have to weld all of that together. But the first order of business is to make the collector neck down to 2.5, and yes, I am keeping everything 2.5. So let's get started. So here's our reducer from 3.5 to 2.5. So it's a 1-inch reduction. This is made of 304 stainless steel, I believe. And here's the flange itself. This doesn't come pre-welded like this. I'm sure you could probably find that, but the company I ordered these from is Vibra Performance. They are pretty good and not crazy expensive. So I'm just gonna hit it with some acetone and clean this off to make sure that we don't have any manufacturing grease or shipping grease or just grease from my hands touching this without gloves on, like I tend to do. You just want anything nice and clean before we start TIG welding. There we go. So on this, I'm just gonna set this in as nice and parallel as I can. So that way this surface is parallel with the flange surface, and there are ways to do that, but I think what I'm gonna do is just kind of eyeball it this way. It would be good enough. Doesn't need to be absolute perfection, but that looks pretty darn good. So I've turned my extraction fan on. I have the camera's brightness turned all the way down so you can hopefully see what I'm doing. And I'm just gonna weld a small section for you so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on when I'm TIGging. No, I'm not the world's best TIG welder. I'm sure there's a million other people, maybe a billion other people who could do it better than me, but hey, I'm doing my best. And ideally, you want these surfaces a little closer together, but you know what? We live in a non-ideal world, and you need to learn how to deal with that. So here's kind of what it looks like. It's a little tough to see, but I think it's going to work out just fine. Again, I'd like these surfaces to be a little closer together, but you know what? I think it's going to work out for us, and I'm going to continue welding all the way around this, alternating positions. I've already done that side a little bit too. So I will turn the camera on when I'm all done. So here is what the reducer looks like actually on the car with the old exhaust off and into the trash where it belongs. And right here, you'll remember there was an O2 sensor, and I want to kind of keep that location the same. So I've went ahead and already made the new pipe with O2 bung welded in, and check this out. If I weld it like that, the tail of the O2 sensor actually goes right up against, well, near about maybe half an inch away from the transmission pan. So that will look really clean and nice. And we can continue welding the rest of the exhaust, or at least making it. I'm just gonna tack weld it in place with my MIG torch, which is a little bit easier to use when you have your hands above your head, so you're not operating a torch and a pedal at the same time. You can do that if you have the correct spool and gas like I do. Besides, we're going to take it back off and fully TIG weld it all the way around. Just want to make sure I get the clock right. Tacky tacky! So I've changed camera angles so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So the O2 sensor actually splits between the transmission pan and the transmission cross member. You can see I can put my finger between the two so I know that the transmission rocking isn't going to interfere. And then we can stash the cable up and in a way, up that way, and then it'll look really, really sharp under here. That is super cool, and I'm really excited about it. So the next question is, I want to put resonators on this car before the mufflers. So here's one. And you can either put it right here on this flange reducer, but I think I want to move it more inborn, so it's like this, and then can go straight back. So we're going to need a pretty tight angle of S. So we're going to need to kind of come out, make a 90, and then like another 90. So these are a little more inborn because I don't like the idea of them just being there. It's kind of hanging down way too low. It could actually be like this, way closer to the bottom of the car. And the way you can do that is with a S-bend. So I kind of want them like here on both sides, I think, because I don't want it to be too low. Yeah, I think it's going to look good. So I just finished welding up the entire system. Here's our muffler. Kind of had to do a little whoop-de-doo to straight pipe into the resonator that goes up to the engine. That's where the O2 bung is. So this is looking really, really nice. Now, you're looking at basically what the underside of the car is going to look like if you're looking straight up at it. So I think it looks really snazzy. A little bit of messy welds right there, but yeah, some okay stuff. You know what? Not bad. I am okay with that. I think it's gonna look really nice in the car. Alrighty, all done. You can see that it comes out of our collector into a resonator, down to the muffler, and just straight dumps down into the ground. I've replicated the same thing on the driver's side, and I think it looks pretty snazzy. I might put an H pipe right here at some point, but I want to see how it sounds without it. Besides, I think there might be some interference between the transmission crossmember and the two pipes, but you never know. Never know what the future is gonna hold, but I think it looks pretty good. The driver's side's a little bit further down to the ground than the passenger side, but hey, I am not perfect, but I think there are some pretty good welds on here, some pretty questionable ones, but the majority of them look like this, and you know what? That's good enough for me. I'm sure there's someone in the comments that's much better that can show me what's what, but you know what? I think this is very solid and looks very nice, and I am more interested in what it sounds like. Alright, that sounds wicked! It's definitely lower and rumblier, but it cuts out a lot of the high tones, so the engine just sounds deeper and more aggressive. That is really cool sounding. Well, that's about it for today. I think it sounds way, way better, and I'm going to do my best to not wait 3 years in between uploads on the Project Dream car. But basically, the only thing left on this car is to do the interior, and it's all done. So I'm not really rushing to the finish line on that. I like to enjoy every single step, and it has been an absolute blast to be doing it so far. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future updates on this magnificent car behind me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.